All right, everybody, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I did want to let you know that I am going to record this meeting just because there's going to be a lot of good information. And I know we have more than 4 people taking self-determined this year. So I'm going to record the meeting so it can be posted to our Facebook page and our website. If you don't want your face to be recorded, that's fine. Just turn your camera off or cover your camera up and you won't be recorded. So my name is Amanda Rains and I am one of your 4-H educators, and I thought it might be kind of helpful to have a self-determined meeting because there's usually a lot of confusion about what you're supposed to do for self-determined, and since you haven't been able to see your advisors in person yet this year, I thought maybe a little bit of clarity would be helpful as we get started with our projects. So what I'd like to do for those of us who are in the meeting live, I just want to know who you are and what school you might go to, what grade you're in, and then what are you thinking about doing for your project. So if everybody would, you can unmute yourself and we'll just take turns sharing what we're thinking about. Abby, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Abby. I am going to be a sophomore. I guess I will be a sophomore. I go to Kenton High School and I'm doing a music self-determined project.
Awesome, thanks. How about you, Claire?
My name's Claire. I am in 7th grade. I'm going into 8th grade next year. I go to Kenton, and for my self-determined project, I'm going to do like face masks.
Cool, that is a great idea, especially very timely right now. Lex.
My name's Lex Weber, and I'm in 7th grade going to 8th grade at Riverdale, and I'm taking a self-determined project of a World War II soldier.
Awesome, that sounds so interesting. And then the last person, your name just says Chromebook, so I'm not sure who you are, or I would try to call you by name.
It's me, Vernie.
Hi, Vern.
Hi. I'm Vernon, and I'm going to be a sophomore next year, 10th grade, in the Kenton High School, and I'm doing a lot of stuff with computers for 4-H.
Okay, great. So those sound like some pretty good ideas for getting your project started. What we're going to do now is I'm just going to kind of walk through what a self-determined project is and what you have to do to actually complete your project. And there's thousands of different ways that you can do a self-determined project, but I do have a couple examples that I want to show you just so you can get an idea of how to organize your project. So the good thing is all of the topics that you all brought up for your projects fit that self-determined category really well. So people should take self-determined if they've completed all the other projects in a specific project area. So let's say you're really into like sewing and you've taken all the sewing projects, then you could do a self-determined to make your own sewing project. Or if the topic that you are interested in is not offered as a project, like there's definitely not a World War II soldier project, even though it sounds really cool. So that makes self-determined the perfect project for you to take because you basically get to make up your own. And self-determined also, there are 30 different idea starters on our website, and they're not a full-blown book. They're like 2 or 3 pages long that help you organize your project if you're interested in that topic, but you don't have to use those either. Anybody can take self-determined, anybody can take self-determined, but we don't recommend it for first-year members, just because we know that your first year of 4-H, sometimes things can be a little bit confusing, and self-determined is basically do it yourself. There's not very much guidance at all, so we don't recommend it for first-year members, but I think everybody who's on this call is going to be good to go for self-determined. There's not a book. There's what's called the Self-Determined Project Guide. And it is a downloadable, printable PDF that you can find at ohio4h.org/self-determined. And it's just a couple pages long, and it helps you organize your project. There's also those 30 idea starters that I talked about that you can print if that's something that you're interested in one of those topics. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of break down the Self-Determined Project Guide and help you kind of organize your project a little bit. So the very first thing to do, and it sounds like you all have a good idea about what you're going to be doing, but the first thing to do is to research a little bit about what you would want to do. And, you know, talk to your parents or your project helper or your advisor about what your ideas are. And that can help you kind of narrow your focus. Because even something like mask making, you know, that could be really broad. So maybe we need to, you know, narrow it down a little bit so that you know specifically what you're going to do for the project. Next, you might want to get some ideas from websites, libraries, books, see what other people have done. If you know somebody who's taken Self-Determined before, it'd be a good idea to talk with them. I know there's several older 4-H members who have taken Self-Determined as camp counselors, and they'd be great people to help you get started. And then also make sure you know what our requirements are for the project. So our requirements are that you fill out the Self-Determined guide, and you'll need to have that guide with you at judging. And that would include doing 3 interest areas, which include 3 activities each. So a minimum of 9 activities, 2 learning activities, 2 leadership experiences, the project summary, and then participating in judging. So we'll cover all of those things in more depth here. The first thing is it's very much like the beginning of any of the 4-H project books. They want you to have what they consider a learning experience. And great news for those of you who are here. This is one of your learning experiences. You are attending a project workshop right now, so that counts as a learning experience. In Hardin County, we also require everybody to go through some type of judging. So that also counts as a learning experience. And even though you haven't done it yet, since you're planning to do that, you can still put that down on your project guide. Other examples would be doing a demonstration, doing some type of activity with your club that is related to your project, or maybe even, having a guest speaker come in and speaking with them about your project as well. Camp would be another example. We're not having camp this year, but that would be an example of a learning experience. There's all sorts of things you could do. You could visit a field trip, any of those types of things. For leadership experiences, these aren't necessarily related to your project, but we would like you to do 2 leadership or citizenship experiences every year in 4-H. So this could be serving as a club officer, serving on a club committee, bringing refreshments to a club meeting, helping set up or tear down, doing a community service project with your club, pretty much anything that has to do with leadership in your club. Inviting a guest speaker to come speak, or even just helping another younger member with their project. Those are all leadership experiences that you could record in your book. And this is the part that we're really going to get into how to set up your project. So they want you to complete at least 3 interest areas. So like think of the interest area as the big umbrella that has several activities underneath it. The interest area in a normal project book is what you would call like the chapter, and then there's usually 3 or 4 activities within that chapter. So these are like your 3 big main goals. What do you want to accomplish? And under those 3 main goals, you should have 3 or 4 activities of how you plan to do that. And I'll show you a few examples in a few minutes. But when you're thinking about setting your project goals, we want to make sure that we set goals that are SMART. And what that means is they're specific. So instead of saying, for example, I want to make masks, you might say, I want to make masks out of cotton and elastic that will be used during this whole pandemic. We want it to be measurable. So how many masks do you want to make? My goal is to make 100 masks and give them to teachers at my school. My goal is to make 50 masks and donate them to a doctor's office. Is this attainable for you? So you know your schedule. Actually, right now, hardly any of us know what's going on. We don't really know our schedules that well. But once things start to progress and open back up, we're going to be busy again. So if making 100 masks is just not a time commitment you can make, then make your goal something that you can do. Maybe it's 25 masks. Maybe it's 10 masks a month. Make sure that what you do is something that you actually have time for and something that you can actually achieve. So for example, Lex, I love your idea of a World War II soldier. However, if you make your goal to meet and interview a World War II soldier, if you don't already know someone, it's going to be kind of difficult, right? There's not very many World War II soldiers left living, so that might not be an attainable goal for you unless you already have that person lined up. But you could say, I'd like to interview the son or daughter of a World War II soldier, and that there's a wider range of people who would be available in that category. Is it relevant? Does it line up with what you want to learn? Because ultimately this project should be, I want to learn something and I want to learn it in a fun way and do it how I want to. And then you do have a deadline that's the time-based part of a SMART goal. The deadline should be judging or makeup judging, depending on which one you plan to go to. So it's very good to have a narrow focus. It's also good to set some deadlines for yourself. How many of you have ever been the person who does their 4-H project the night before judging? I know I did that a couple times when I was a teenager. Sometimes with these self-determined projects, it's really not easy to do it all the week before. So setting deadlines for each activity is a good idea. So let me show you one example. One of the most popular self-determined projects is miniature fairy gardening. And I actually judged this at the state fair last year and was just blown away. And so I hadn't even known fairy gardening was a thing before, but apparently it's a big thing. And so here's an example of some of the project goals you might have. So you might set your first interest area as just selecting the container, researching online what's a good container for specific plants or for fairy gardening, visit a flea market to find a container, spray paint the container. So none of these activities really are going to require a lot of time, but they're all really important for making that fairy garden because the container is the foundation. The second interest area is in the fairy elements. So you can select a theme, you can research and construct your own elements like a path or a fence or a pond, and then the third would be shopping for the things that you can't make yourself. And then the third interest area would be plants. So research what a good plant would be to plant in there, how to take care of it. Can I plant, string of pearls with hens and chicks? Those are all things that you need to find out. Visit a local greenhouse was activity 2, to talk to the staff about suitable plants. And then step 3 was purchase and plant. And so in theory, all of these interest areas are pretty attainable to do in 1 or 2 weekends, right? Like you could easily find the container and get that whole interest area done in a day if you needed to. But you can also be broader if you would like. So an example of one of the projects I judged last year in a different county was, I put Hardin County, but they created a database for their veteran grave sites in their county. So right now there's lots of great resources and websites you can go to find a gravesite already existing. But what this person did was they wanted to make sure that every veteran in their county received a flag for Memorial Day and for Veterans Day. And they wanted people to be able to find grave sites of veterans in their county so that even if their family had moved away, that they could be honored. It was really, really cool. So the first interest area was creating a list of all of the veterans that had passed away in the county. They got help from their local VA's office. They also visited their, Geological Society, the Genealogy Society. And then they also created a survey where people could submit that, my grandfather is buried here and they're a veteran of this war. And that was really neat. They also contacted their local media and then were able to have people take that survey. So that was their first interest area, just creating the list. Their second interest area was they made a photograph of every grave in the county of a veteran. So they would visit each cemetery and they cleaned off the headstones of each veteran and placed an American flag and then took a photo. So you could imagine, compared to the container of the fairy garden, which we could probably do in an afternoon, this interest area, this activity would take much longer, because even in Hardin County, I couldn't begin to tell you how many cemeteries we have, but I'm sure we have lots of grave sites that would need to be cleaned off, and it was quite an undertaking. And then the last interest area they did was they organized that database. So they alphabetized it by last name. They created a simple website that had each service member's name, and then they promoted it through the media and through the Veterans Affairs Office. So it was a really neat project, but it also was a project that they started pretty much right after judging, and it took them a whole year to complete. But that's another example of how you can break down these overarching interest areas into smaller chunks for each activity. Idea starters are a great starting place. I know for sure they have one for music. I know they have one for computers. So Vern had mentioned computers. So there's 32 different topics. I hesitate to call them a book, but they give a little bit of background information and a lot of ideas for what your activities and interest areas can be. So those are also on ohio4h.org/self-determined, and you can check those out. There's not, if it's not an idea starter, that doesn't mean you can't do it as a self-determined project. So for example, I'm pretty positive there's not one about World War II soldiers, but you could still look at these and kind of get an idea of what types of activities they suggest. And there may be one that is about history or living history, so you could look at something that's similar. For judging of self-determined projects, we follow the state fair requirements to make it easy for you, because why make a poster for me if it's not going to be suitable for the state fair? So the state fair requirements are a trifold poster that's 36 inches by 48 inches, and they want it to include the title of your project, general background information, such as like, why were you interested, and what's the history, or what's the main idea of your project? What are the interest areas that you did and the activities that went with them? And then what did you learn, or what did you complete? Excuse me. You can also bring any items that will fit on the table space, which is 48 inches wide by 15 inches deep. So you could put your poster on there and then also have whatever else you wanted to. So you could bring the masks that you make, or a computer, or all sorts of different things. The best books that I've seen that are self-determined are when people print off all of their resources every time that they look at the computer and do some research, and they put that in a 3-ring binder, and it's organized by those interest areas. And if you don't have research, there can always be something that you could put in there. So it could be photos of you doing something, or it could be, you know, if you did the fairy garden, it could be the tags from the plants so that you are able to identify the plants. There's all sorts of things that you could put in that binder to really collect your thoughts. So those are the best projects, the ones that are really organized the same way as this page in your self-determined guide. You should be able to point out to a judge, or anybody walking by your project at the fair should be able to say, this person learned this, 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 and this, and look at the activities they did with it. So that's an overview of self-determined project. What questions do you have? Or if you have ideas about your own project that you want to kind of share and see if we can help you start getting organized, we can do that too. I am going to stop recording at this point. So if you're watching this online, thank you for watching, and you can contact me if you have any questions.